Hi, my name is Braxton, and I'll be discussing with you some strategies and tactics of distributive bargaining agreements. Now, some vocabulary that we need to go over first. A target point is a party's preferred price. This is a point at which a negotiator would like to conclude negotiations. A resistance point is the furthest price that a buyer would be willing to pay for a price, so the highest that a buyer would be willing to pay for an item, and is the lowest price that a seller would be willing to give the item for. So is the negotiator's bottom line, quote unquote. And their asking price is the initial offer and is the first number that is quoted from a seller. Now, in the initial offer, you have to factor in some give and take into this. And the reason for this is because it's a good idea to make an initial offer that is a little bit closer to your target point, as this allows for some wiggle room for concessions. Now, concessions are valuable because these are things that are not essential to the deal. However, they could sweeten the deal for some parties. Um, it's also a good idea to make the initial offer reasonable, as too high or too low of an initial offer can signal to the other party that you're not serious about the negotiations and they may just threaten to break off negotiations altogether. Another point is that the starting price, the target point, and the resistance points need to be established before negotiations begin. Now, based on the information given, the target and resistance points can be inferred. Um, Now, the spread of figures between the two parties' resistance points is where the bargaining actually begins. It's what's known as the bargaining range, the settlement range, or the zone of potential agreement, and which means that any offers that lie outside these points uh, can be rejected out of hand. Now, another factor to consider is the best alternative to negotiated agreement, or BATNA, BATNA. This is good to have because you need alternative strategies when it becomes clear that initial negotiations will break down and no settlement will be reached. Um, the use of this, or the effectiveness of the use of an alternative agreement, is dependent on the willingness of both parties to not break off negotiations and instead sit and actually get a deal done. Negotiators, excuse me, that have strong alternatives with more positive outcomes for either one party or the other, they have more power and they have a higher likelihood of getting their goals achieved. Another important point to discuss is discovering the opposition's resistance point. Now, this is where information comes into play. Information is crucial when discovering the opposition's resistance points, because the more that you know, the better your odds are of striking a favorable agreement. It's a good idea to aim to figure out as much as possible regarding the other party's resistance point and their target price, as this allows you to manipulate information easier to get a more favorable outcome. Another important point to consider is influencing the other party's resistance points. And this is done by estimating the cost of delay by both sides. The side that has less to lose, the more or the longer that negotiations drag on, the more of an advantage they have because they can play for time. A side that is short on time in the agreement, they are in a rush to conclude an offer, and therefore they are more likely to settle for an offer that they would not settle for had they had more time to negotiate. And these are some strategies that can be helpful to keep in mind during distributive bargaining agreements.